He wakes up one morning, packs a single suitcase, and walks out of a 30-year marriage. No affair, no warning, no explanation. Just gone. His wife stands in the doorway, stunned. Their adult children call, desperate for answers. Friends whisper at dinner parties. Everyone asks the same question. Why? Welcome to DepthRealm, where we dive beneath the surface of human behavior to uncover the hidden patterns that shape our most profound decisions. If you're ready to understand the psychology behind life's biggest mysteries, hit that subscribe button. Because today, we're exploring a phenomenon that's quietly reshaping modern marriage. Here's what makes this even more chilling. This isn't rare anymore. It's a silent revolution happening in plain sight. While overall divorce rates have been declining for decades, something shocking is happening among older adults. For people over 50, the divorce rate has doubled since the 1990s. For those 65 and older, it's tripled. Today, 1 in every 3 divorces in America involves someone over 50. Sociologists have a name for this phenomenon, gray divorce, and it's forcing us to confront an uncomfortable truth. What's happening inside these decades-long marriages that makes a man decide being alone is better than the life he spent 30 years building? The easy answer: midlife crisis, sports car, younger woman, desperate grab for fading youth. But here's what the research actually shows. In the vast majority of these cases, the man doesn't leave for another woman. He leaves to be alone, on purpose. He actively chooses the silence over the life he knows. In this video, I'm going to walk you through 4 profound, often unspoken reasons why men over 50 are walking away. This isn't about assigning blame. It's about understanding the emotional calculus that leads a man to believe the only way to save himself is to leave everything behind. Section 1. The loss of self. Let me tell you about David. For 35 years, David was a corporate executive, senior VP at a Fortune 500 company. His entire identity revolved around that corner office. His friends, colleagues, his achievements, quarterly earnings. His value, the deals he closed. At home, he was the provider, the man who paid the mortgage, funded the college accounts, bought the family cars. That was his function, his role, his purpose. Then in the span of 18 months, 2 seismic shifts hit simultaneously. His youngest daughter left for university, and he took an early retirement package. His world just stopped. He described it to me as a deafening silence. I woke up on a Tuesday with nowhere to be. My wife had her book club, her volunteer committee, her circle of friends. She had a whole life. I looked at my calendar, completely empty. No urgent emails, no crisis calls, no problems to solve. I walked through our house and felt utterly useless. I realized I didn't have any real hobbies. My friends were all work friends. I didn't even know what I liked to do anymore. My entire identity was David the executive and dad. Both of those jobs got terminated on the same day. The man in the mirror was a complete stranger. This is what psychologists call identity dissolution. It's that devastating moment when a man realizes he's spent decades playing roles: husband, father, provider, and one day, he looks in the mirror and doesn't recognize who's looking back. For generations, society gave men a simple equation: your job equals your identity. A man's value, his purpose, his entire sense of self was welded to his ability to provide. He was the engineer, the manager, the business owner. That wasn't just what he did, that was who he was. Everything else in his life, his marriage, his family, his social standing, was built on top of that foundation. He worked 60-hour weeks, climbed the corporate ladder, shouldered the financial stress, because that was his function in the system. He outsourced his identity to his career title. Then 2 massive life changes collide at the exact same time. The kids leave, and the house goes silent. The daily chaos of morning routines, sports practices, family dinners, school emergencies, it all vanishes overnight. The role of dad, a central part of his identity for 20-plus years, fundamentally transforms. It doesn't disappear, but its daily job description does. The house isn't just empty of people, it feels empty of purpose. This usually coincides with retirement. And retirement isn't just the end of a 9 to 5, it's the end of an identity. When he doesn't have an office to go to, a team to lead, problems to solve, projects to complete, the question echoes in his mind like a haunting. Who am I now? Carl Jung called this process individuation, the journey of becoming who you truly are, separate from the roles society assigns you. For these men, it's happening 30 years too late. The marriage, the house, the carefully constructed life, it all starts to feel like a museum, a monument to a person they aren't anymore. The love for his wife might still exist somewhere deep down, but she's intrinsically connected to that old identity. Looking at her becomes a constant reminder of the role he used to play, a role that now feels hollow, empty, suffocating. The decision to walk away becomes a desperate act of self-preservation, a frantic search to answer one question before time runs out. Who am I if I'm not a provider? He isn't running from his wife. He's running from the empty costume of the man he became, hoping to find what's left of himself underneath. But there's something even more devastating than losing yourself, and it's happening in the quietest moments of these marriages. Section 2. The exhaustion of peace. The second reason men walk away is a massive shift in priorities. After decades of navigating the complex, often turbulent waters of a long-term marriage, many men reach a breaking point where they crave peace far more than they crave passion. They're simply not willing to keep paying the emotional price of maintaining the relationship. Think about what a 30-year marriage actually is. It's a massive archive of compromises, negotiations, tiny unspoken resentments that accumulate like sediment at the bottom of a river. It's rarely one explosive fight that ends things. It's the slow, grinding erosion from thousands of small conflicts. The argument over money from 10 years ago that never really got resolved. The constant disagreement over how to handle the in-laws. The daily annoyances, how he loads the dishwasher, how she manages the thermostat, that transform from quirks into symbols of fundamental disrespect. Over time, a toxic pattern takes root. Psychologists call it the demand-withdraw cycle. One partner, often the wife, becomes the demander. She wants to talk about problems, express feelings, work on the relationship, process emotions. In response, the other partner, often the husband, becomes the withdrawer. He shuts down, avoids the conversation, retreats into silence. Why? Because he's learned over decades that talking leads to conflict, conflict leads to stress, and avoidance, however temporary, leads to peace. Over the years, this withdrawal becomes second nature. The emotional muscles needed for deep, vulnerable conversation just atrophy, like in used limbs. The marriage slowly settles into what many call the roommate phase. They coexist. They manage the logistics of life, bills, groceries, social obligations, maintaining the house, but the intimacy? Gone. They sit in the same room, both scrolling on their phones, living in two separate, silent worlds. The home stops being a sanctuary. It becomes a shared space, nothing more. This is all rooted in a deep fear of vulnerability. For many men of this generation, emotional openness wasn't part of the curriculum. They were taught to be stoic, to be strong, to handle it, to man up. After years of building emotional walls to protect themselves or just to keep the peace, the idea of tearing them down in their late 50s feels impossible. The energy it would take to rekindle a passion that's been cold for 20 years. Overwhelming. In comparison, the idea of being alone starts to look incredibly attractive. It isn't loneliness they fear, it's the sheer exhaustion of trying. A post from a men's support forum captured this with brutal honesty. My wife is a good person. I need to be clear about that. But my life with her was a never-ending series of negotiations. What are we doing this weekend? Who do we have to see? Why did I say that to the neighbors? What do I think about her sister's new boyfriend? Every single day was filled with a low-level hum of expectation and correction. I felt like I was being constantly managed, constantly evaluated. When I started thinking about the next 20 years, the thought of waking up in a house where the only person I had to answer to was myself. It felt like breathing for the first time in decades. The idea of pure, uncomplicated quiet was the most seductive thing in the world. I didn't leave because I hated her. I left because I was in love with the idea of silence. And that's the heart of it. The decision to walk away isn't an act of aggression, it's an act of surrender. He's surrendering the fight. He's tired of the cycles of fixing and forgiving. He's not looking for the highs of a new romance. He's just trying to escape the lows of the old one. Once a man gets a taste of that profound peace, the thought of going back to the old dynamic becomes unbearable. The silence he finds isn't empty, it's full of the peace he's been craving for years. But here's where it gets even more complex, because for many of these men, there's a third realization that changes everything. Section 3. The contract is complete. The third reason is about the original structure of many traditional marriages. It's about the end of a contract that was never spoken out loud. For a lot of men over 50, their primary job in the marriage, the role of provider, is finished. And when that job ends, they look at the relationship and ask a devastating question. Why does this still exist? For much of the 20th century, many marriages, especially for the boomer generation, operated on an unspoken deal. He would be the primary breadwinner, ensuring financial security, a stable home, a comfortable life. In return, she would manage the household, raise the children, handle the family's social and emotional life. This isn't a moral judgment. It was a functional arrangement for its time. A man's success as a husband was measured by his ability to provide a safe home, a good education, a comfortable retirement. But what happens when the contract is fulfilled? What happens after he sells the business he poured his life into? After the last mortgage payment is made? After the kids graduate college? After the retirement accounts are fully funded? The primary function that gave him purpose and status within the family is suddenly gone. This moment triggers a ruthless reevaluation of the marriage. The man starts thinking, my job was to build the ship, stock it with supplies, and get it across the ocean. We've reached the other shore. The kids are launched, the house is paid off, the retirement accounts are funded. My work is done. So now what? If the couple nurtured a deep friendship and emotional bond over the years, they transition into a new chapter together. They rediscover each other, travel, pursue shared interests. But if that connection has worn thin, if the partnership was primarily functional, there's often nothing left to hold the marriage together. The partnership was, in essence, a long-term project. And the project is now complete. This is made even more complex by the rising financial independence of women. In past generations, a woman in her 50s or 60s might have had few options outside the marriage due to economic dependence. Divorce wasn't just emotionally difficult, it was financially impossible. Today, that's often not the case. She might have her own career, her own pension, her own assets, her own social security. This lowers the economic barrier to divorce, making the decision to split a realistic, though still painful, option for both people. It subtly reinforces the man's feeling that his provider role is obsolete. She doesn't need him in the way she once might have. And if he's honest with himself, he may realize he doesn't know how to be a husband in any other capacity. A financial advisor who specializes in gray divorce shared this story with me. He had a 62-year-old client who had just sold his construction company for a life-changing amount of money. The man came to him not for investment advice, but for exit advice. He said, "I spent 40 years building this company so my wife could stay home with our kids, so they could go to any college they wanted, so we could have the house we dreamed of. The project is finished. Now that the business is closed, what's left?" His tone wasn't angry, it wasn't bitter, it was pragmatic. He saw the marriage as a successful venture that had simply run its course. For him, staying felt like showing up to an office after the company has already shut down. So when he walks away, he isn't just leaving a wife. He's clocking out of a job that's ended. And from his perspective, he feels no need to look back. The work, as he saw it, is done. But there's one more reason, and it's the quietest, most heartbreaking of all. Section 4. The loneliest place. The fourth reason men walk away is the most tragic. They've come to a devastating conclusion. The loneliest place on earth isn't being alone. It's being with someone and feeling completely invisible. It's critical to understand the difference between solitude and loneliness. Solitude is simply being alone. It can be peaceful, restorative. It's often a choice. Loneliness is the pain of feeling disconnected and unseen, even when you're surrounded by people. And the hard truth is, some of the loneliest people in the world are in long-term marriages. For years, a man might feel like he's walking on eggshells in his own house. Anything he says will be criticized, corrected, or met with complete indifference. He wants to share a story about his day. He gets a distracted nod from his wife, who's scrolling on her phone. He shares an opinion. It's immediately dismissed or corrected. He tries to express a fear about getting older. The subject gets changed to something practical, a leaky faucet, a broken appliance. He starts to feel less like a partner and more like a constant disappointment. To avoid the friction, he just stops trying. He stops sharing his thoughts, his worries, his dreams. He retreats into a fortress of silence because it's safer than the battlefield of conversation. This, of course, just widens the gap between them. Over decades, this leads to couples living parallel lives under one roof. She has her friends, he has his. She has her hobbies. He retreats to the garage or the golf course. They don't share inside jokes anymore. They don't finish each other's sentences. They don't look forward to telling each other about their day. The empty nest phase is brutal in exposing this reality. When the kids, the one reliable topic of conversation, are gone, the silence that's left is deafening. They look at each other across the dinner table and realize they're strangers who just happened to share a mortgage for 30 years. The breaking point is rarely a huge fight. It's something small, a moment of chilling clarity. It might be the realization that he's genuinely happier having a brief, friendly chat with the cashier at the hardware store than he is having dinner with his wife. In that fleeting 2-minute exchange with a complete stranger, he felt more seen than he has in years at his own dinner table. A story from a men's support group captures this perfectly. A 60-year-old man was explaining his separation to his adult children. He said, "For the last 10 years, I felt like a ghost in my own home. I paid the bills, I mowed the lawn, I fixed things. I was there, but nobody could really see me. Your mother would ask about my day, but her eyes would be on the TV. I tried to express a fear about my health, about getting older, and the subject would be changed to something that needed fixing. The day I knew I had to leave was when our dog died. I was heartbroken. He'd been my companion for 15 years, my buddy. I sat there crying, and your mother just patted my shoulder and said, well, he was getting old. There was no shared grief, no connection, no acknowledgement of what I was feeling. I was completely alone in my sadness. I realized right then that I would rather be physically alone than ever feel that kind of loneliness again. That's the core of it. He's leaving to escape the soul-crushing loneliness of being with someone who no longer seems to see him. The life he creates by himself, as quiet as it seems from the outside, is fundamentally less lonely than the life he left. And that, more than anything, explains why he doesn't look back. But here's where this story takes an unexpected turn. After hearing all of this, it's easy to paint these men as villains. They're the quitters, the selfish ones who abandon their families after decades. We're conditioned to expect the story where the man leaves for a younger woman, trading in his old life for a new model. The midlife crisis cliché, the sports car, the desperate grab for youth. But when you actually look at the data on gray divorce, when you listen to these men's stories, something completely different emerges. Everyone assumes it's another woman, a younger model, a fresh start with someone who makes him feel young again. But the truth is far more profound. He didn't leave for another woman at all. He left to find another man. He left for the man he used to be before his identity got swallowed by his roles. Or even more poignantly, he left to finally meet the man he never got the chance to become. This act of walking away, which looks so destructive from the outside, is often a desperate, last-ditch search for an authentic life. It's a rebellion against the slow death of the self. These men look at the calendar, they feel the new aches in their joints, the shortness of breath, the gray in the mirror, and they have a terrifying thought: time is running out. The years they have left are precious, and they are no longer willing to spend them living a life that feels like a performance. They aren't necessarily looking for constant happiness or wild adventure. They're seeking authenticity. A life where their home is a true sanctuary, not a stage where they play a role they no longer understand. It's about being able to sit in a room in total silence and feel at peace with the only person they have to answer to, themselves. The philosopher Viktor Frankl wrote that man's primary drive isn't pleasure, it's the search for meaning. For these men, the meaning they built their lives around has evaporated. The provider role is done, the father role has transformed, the marriage has become a shell. Walking away becomes their final attempt to create meaning on their own terms. It's a final, desperate attempt to make their inner world match their outer reality before the curtain falls for good. So why are men over 50 walking away and never looking back? It's the loss of self that hits when the roles of father and provider end, leaving a void where an identity used to be. It's the deep craving for peace over the constant negotiation of a worn-out relationship. It's the pragmatic realization that the provider contract has been fulfilled, leaving the partnership feeling obsolete. And most painfully, it's an escape from the crushing loneliness of feeling invisible in your own home. This gray divorce phenomenon isn't a simple story of heroes and villains. It's a reflection of massive societal shifts. We're living longer than ever, asking our marriages to last 50 or 60 years, a challenge past generations never faced. The stigma around divorce has faded. Gender roles have evolved. What works for a relationship in your 20s doesn't always work in your 60s. For the men who walk away, this decision is rarely easy. It's terrifying, uncertain, but for them, necessary. It's the start of a second act, a final attempt to write an ending to their own story that feels true. Now, this is a deeply complex topic, and what I've shared is just one perspective on a much bigger conversation. So here's what I want to know from you. If you're living this right now, whether you're the one thinking about leaving or the one being left, What's the one thing keeping you from making a decision? Or if someone you love walked away, what do you wish you had understood sooner? Your perspective in the comments might be exactly what another person needs to hear today. And if this video gave you a new way to think about relationships, identity, and the choices we make in the second half of life, hit that subscribe button. This is DepthRealm, where we explore the hidden forces shaping your thoughts, your beliefs, and your reality itself, the psychology behind the choices that define our lives. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next deep dive.